Welcome, everyone, to the Power Hour, a monthly interview series featuring leaders from the front lines of the fight for gender justice. My name is Dr. Caroline Heldman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Representation Project. And I am thrilled to be joined today by my co-host, Sydney Corey. Sydney is a film professional with experience working at organizations including the REP Project, also Film Independent and A24. Sydney is currently working in documentary development at Concordia Studios. Take it away, Sydney.
Hi, everyone. So Caroline touched on what the Power Hour is. So we interview every month influential change makers. And today we have Alya Michelson with us. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to give a brief overview of exactly who she is. So Alya is an artist, philanthropist, and journalist with a passion for uplifting stories of the immigrant women's experience. As co-chair of Michelson Philanthropies, Alya devotes her personal and professional experiences toward making the world less unfair for those who need help and inspiration. Born in Russia, Alya studied music and dance as a child and never lost her passion for the arts. As a young woman, she pursued a career in journalism, earning a degree from Moscow State University, and worked as a correspondent for Russia's leading network, RIA Novosti. Correct me if you probably know how to pronounce it a little better than I do. Covering several of the biggest stories of the day, including the Kursk submarine disaster in 2000 and the Belzin school siege in 2004. After graduating with a master's in economics from Moscow State Institute of International Relations in 2008, Alya served as the spokesperson for the vice chairman of the state legislative body in the ruling assembly of Russia. Along the way, she met Dr. Michelson, and Alya took a big leap of faith in 2012. She got married, immigrated to the United States, and began pursuing a career in music. Her single released in 2019, American Beauty, represents a new chapter in Alya's musical journey that blends her philanthropic and artistic purposes. Alya's newest venture is First Gen, a storytelling platform that celebrates global citizenship by highlighting how the immigrant experience strengthens the American story. Harkening back to Alya's journalistic roots, First Gen celebrates the story of America's 23 million immigrant women, famous and unknown, artists and entrepreneurs, innovators and trailblazers. While every immigrant woman's story is different, they frequently share common experiences of arrival, integration, and renewal. So thank you again, Alya, for being here. I'm just going to jump into questions now. So obviously you've lived an incredible life so far. Can you tell us more about your life journey?
Thank you very much for having me. And sometimes I look back at the road that I took, and I cannot believe at all it was all happening with me, because I still feel the same little Soviet girl looking out of the window and dreaming about visiting all the beautiful places that I was reading in my Soviet books. And yes, I did have a life and a career as a journalist in Russia. I was one of the millenniums that entered universities together with Putin, taking the Kremlin. And I immigrated to state, and I now call myself mother and an artist. But as you said, many life, but I believe with the same united purpose. I was always a storyteller, and I was always wanted to make a difference.
Thank you, Alya. So one of the hats that you've worn is the hat of the journalist. You investigated in Russia, you investigated some of the biggest stories of the day. Tell us about the work that it took to cover these stories, given the grave freedom of press concerns in Russia.
Thank you. Yes, I did indeed covered a lot of stories that resonated with the rest of the world. Unfortunately, majority of them were tragic stories. Like the sinking of the Kursk submarine or Beslan massacre, or terroristic attacks next to the National Hotel that I accidentally witnessed and was the first one to report. And I like to think that I probably can quite accurately answer your question, because on my adventure to find the freedom of press that was promised by our teachers and journalism faculty, I worked everywhere from the news agency to papers and radios, TV, both so-called independent and state-owned. I worked as a spokesperson. And long story short, I didn't find freedom of press anywhere. And there was always someone to put you in a box, bigger or smaller. And partially my decision to move from Russia permanently was based on my disappointed with the profession. And I immigrated 10 years ago, already feeling out of the air. And today, work in Russia, honestly, as a journalist, is incredibly challenging. And the majority of my peers from the university, it was probably about like 217. I don't remember the total number. They either today immigrated from country or immigrated from profession. And I really admire those who still trying to survive in Russia, like Dmitry Muratov, who recently got a Nobel Peace Prize, and his whole team. They just my heroes.
Just picking up on something you mentioned, did I hear you correctly that you observed a terrorist attack?
Yes, it's like, like once in a time opportunity, if you can put it this way. It did happen. I was an absolutely accident witness of a terroristic attack, and I didn't realize, nobody realized that it was terroristic attack when it first happened. I was running from my university. I was still studying on a journalism faculty, and I was running from school to the news agency when something just blew up literally in front of me, maybe like, I don't know, 200 meters. Somehow, surprisingly, I wasn't affected in any way, but, and I didn't even realize what happened, but I just, looking back, it's very interesting for me to understand this situation like a doctor would be looking at the patients and trying to figure out what happened, instead of running for my life and thinking, oh my gosh, what happened? I have to somehow save myself. The first thought in my head was to pick up the phone and call to my agency to report, which I did. And I was the first one in the world to report it. And then I was developing the story in the field.
So instead of running from danger, you reported on it. Got it.
Yeah, I guess, there are two versions. Either training on a journalism faculty was very good, or I was just, really waiting for my chance to shine.
That's actually a perfect segue. So as I understand it, you were one of the few female journalists covering certain topics, specifically military in Russia. Can you tell us more about the positive and negative aspects of being the only woman journalist in the room?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to that, I was very young. I was in my 20s. I just started to work in a Russian news agency, RIA Novosti, which you actually pronounced very correctly. And they put me first to the Department of Economics, but shortly moved me to the Department of Military and Police. I always wanted to work on a hot spot and some military conflict, so I didn't mind until I met my colleagues from other agencies and other media. And all middle-aged men with beer bellies, with ambitions, they were calling themselves legends and basically spent their time bullying me around. But shortly, their love was changed by anger, because instead of participating in their drinking parties, I was writing stories, I was asking questions, I was working very hard to create my own sources circle. And Newsmaker shortly started opening up more for me, because they trusted me more. They liked me because I was a female. They thought and felt that I will not betray them, because they saw in their face, for whatever reason, threat. And I was someone that they could trust. So my work over there as one of the very few females, and on a regular basis in the pool of journalists that follow Ministry of Defense that I was doing for several years, I was actually the only one female. It was quite successful tactic, but of my agency. I guess that they were hoping that that's how it will work out, because I was so different. And yes, my soft approach and my knowledge did work really well in that circumstances. But overall, thinking back, I do think that military topics and conflict zones, they, in my personal experience, not the best for females, because at the end of the day, nobody wants you there to work as a journalist, especially if something is happening in the Muslim countries. It attracts unwanted attention, and the conflict zone and the places for journalists, they're just not suited for females. Like, for example, when we talk about refugee camps, there is no place for female immigrant to be. There is no space tent to change, to feed the baby. They're very unified and geared mainly to men. So unless it's your personal choice and calling, it's hard to work in a conflict zone. It's very heavily populated by men, and females always, at least for now, they're not mainly taken seriously.
Well, and along those same lines, Alya, more broadly perhaps, can you talk to us about the unique issues that powerful women face, the treatment that diminishes their professionalism, for example, a focus on their appearance rather than their work, persistent sexism that's aimed at women? And can you also tell us specifically about your experience of being a working mother in journalism?
Yes, I can tap again into my personal story. When I entered the journalism faculty in Russia, in Moscow, it was quite a while ago, females were not allowed to study at the international department, journalism department, and it's heritage from Soviets when alumni would be sent abroad to work, and females were not considered to be a good choice. And for other girls and I, we were first to break the rule. But before that, we had to make a deal with the dean that we will be straight A students for a semester to be considered a good choice for that department, while our male peers were just accepted because they were males. You know, during my career in Russia as a journalist, as the PR person, I was told so many times that I have to better focus on a family and stop feeding my ambitions and try to make pirashkis. And the gender stereotype is alive, and it's alive in journalism, it's alive in any other professions, and it's significant in Russia. And I hope that my daughters will be experiencing less of it here in the United States. And you know, just talking about being a mom, yes, eventually I did created a family and became a mom, not because I was listening to the not very smart advice from the men, but because I felt that I was ready. And motherhood did bring my ambitions down, because I entered a sort of protective mode. I developed a fear that I couldn't be around for my child if something happened. So like looking back, if in the beginning of my career, I was ready to pick up the phone and go to any part of the world, to any conflict, today I'm very selective what I would spotlight as a journalist, or what would I be ready to do.
Thank you.
Do you have any advice for women pursuing journalism and also trying to balance a family life?
I think the best thing would be for everybody just to be true to yourself and listen to yourself, what you really want to do, and don't listen to outside advice, because at the end of the day, it is your gut what tells you the truth. I've listened to so many advices during my career, and I regret them, because if not for that, I would just made so many right choices, and my road would be much straighter, and I wouldn't make so many mistakes that I did.
That's really important. I think, especially with women, I think there's a lot of different outside voices that come in, and it's really impactful to hear that, you know, it's important for women to make their own choices. But to segue into kind of your career in art, so you've always been involved in art and performance. But you essentially reinvented yourself as a performer once you moved to the States. Can you tell us a bit more about what prompted that path and how you found the courage to pursue that?
Together with immigration to States, I also immigrated from journalism because I just stopped believing in this profession. And the music felt something that couldn't be censored. And it gave me voice in some sense because giving voice when I was shy to speak, and I was very shy of who I am. I was shy of my accent, of my appearance, of my cultural heritage. And I realized not right away that the degree of my Russianness that I was so shy of didn't matter in any cases. What was matter was that I was an outsider. That was the key. And I was foreign, and I was already prejudged and often misunderstood because of cultural differences. And that inspired me and directed my path as a musician. And I purposely try to use these days cultural allegories and archetypes to complete the story about myself, about Russian female, about Slavic heritage that I belong to, for Americans or for someone who is open to listen. And for example, like in my latest single, Pleasure in Mind, that is very heavily influenced by Slavic folk. And I feel that stereotypes about Russian females is far from reality. And it's not just stereotypes regarding Russians, but a lot of stereotypes if you will take a look at basically any nation. And America is a unique country to talk about it because there's so many crossroads here. It's like the country everybody want to come to because it's the best country. It's the country to fulfill the dream. It's a country of dreams. So it's like a great example of diversity of humanity that exists on the earth. And the stereotypes, they're very dangerous. And based on my experience and an experience, a lot of female immigrants that I'm working today, it creates very dangerous barriers, the misunderstanding, the stereotypization, not willingness to listen. And it's something that I'm working with and trying to change, hopefully.
Well, and you're doing that directly right through your First Gen initiative. This is a platform that shares the stories of immigrant women, many of whom may have had challenges similar to you. Can you tell us more about this platform, more about this initiative, and also about the power of storytelling? Why are stories so important for shifting culture?
I always believed in storytelling because it helps you to connect to the issue on a personal level. But it's vital to create a stories that's, and if it's possible to give the mic to the characters, lets them express what they think it's important, not what you or I think it is. And immigration and female immigration, which is a special, very separate, a very complicated topic, is my personal story. And I felt on my journey how politicized and negatively colored the immigration issue is. Like the media, unfortunately, present it's something associated with pain, death, taking away something from the people who live already on this ground. But it is also bravery. It is also power. It's also resilience. It's love, but nobody talks about that. And I felt that this is the niche that I could fulfill as a storyteller, and as an artist, as a journalist, and this is how First Gen was born. First Gen, which is one of the new project within Michelson Philanthropies that we do, the family with my husband, gives chance to all the fantastic female immigrants that I'm meeting on my journey, open up on their own terms and share their stories. And I use whatever skills I have. Sometimes it is a podcast, sometimes we just talk, sometimes it's written down interview, or I will decide to write a music about it and use some cultural pieces from certain countries, from certain cultures. But also I'm working on a doc series to tell the story of my generation of journalists, which is really important in my opinion. And also hope to release a book depicting female Slavic characters in fairy tales and legends.
Wow. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit more about your docuseries? What this entails, your life as a filmmaker, and maybe any details you have about when we might be able to view your series.
It's still in the work, but as we started our conversation, we briefly tapped to the topic of freedom of press in Russia, and it's very personal to me. And as I mentioned, I entered journalism faculty in 2000, and people call this generation as millenniums. And it was very interesting generation in my native country in Russia, because it was the year when Vladimir Putin became the president, and he promised a lot of freedoms, all freedoms that you can take, and freedom of press and freedom of choice. And everybody was pointing at us, and I remember headlines in papers like, "This is generation that's going to change country. We're going to become the best democratic country in the world." And look where I am. I immigrated from the country, and the majority of people, journalists, and journalists is supposed to be one of the forces of the government, something that could oversee good or bad happening, and somehow gear the authorities to make right choices and show to the public what's going on, so public can also regulate somehow. And the generation that was supposed to do is gone. And that's a docuseries that I'm working on. I want to show the stories of the journalists, and I'm one of these people that was supposed to change something. You know, when I was discussing this idea with some other filmmakers, they said, you know what, it's not just about you. It's not just about the Russia. It's not just about the journalism. It's so metaphorical. It's about, you know, dying places. Even here in America, when you see like places dying, and the generation that people hoped for just living. So it's just something on a cross between the migration and the freedom of press and the journalism and female empowerment. I hope it will be exciting and educating for everyone, including me.
And when do you, any idea in terms of timeline, Alya?
Can't tell.
Okay, fingers crossed. I know filmmaking is never a linear process. It's always back and forth.
We actually have quite a few questions in the chat right now, so I'm gonna jump into those. So one question from Anonymous: what are the ways that US women can be inclusive of women immigrants in the fight for gender justice? Are there common ways US feminism falls or leaves out women immigrants?
Well, as I said, the female immigration is a specific topic. Although when I started to working with this several years ago and was having discussions with people who professionally work with immigration issue, they did not understand why it's so different. You know, you're immigrant and you're immigrant, but it turns out, and I can tell you on my personal experience, that being immigrant female is very different from being immigrant male. First of all, the females, they come from different countries with different heritage, with different understanding who female is. Imagine being female that comes from Muslim country. You have absolutely different understanding who you are. You sometimes not allowed to speak in the presence of men that you don't know. And on top of that, you have the pressure of female. It's like, I was explaining to people, it's like double trouble. First of all, you're already not sure about yourself as the female. You're already pressed yourself down to the earth that you're not good enough because you just was not lucky enough to be a man by birth. But in addition of that, there is some gender gaps that US recognize between females and men, and it applies to female as well. So differences exist, and I do believe that should be different way work with immigration, female immigration, and for the Americans or any other country to welcome and to realize that I think just listening and try, do not judge, do not stereotypes, do not think, okay, well, if this person is wearing hijab or this person, I don't know, have whatever makeup that look somehow strange to me, it doesn't mean that this person, whatever you think, you know, she is. I think that's important, to be open-minded, to be inclusive, and just listen and ask a question, let person to tell the story.
Right, to really combat stereotypes. So not interacting through the lens of stereotypes and being conscious about that. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Alya. Another question, your story of witnessing terrorism and choosing to report on it is incredible. What advice would you give to girls and young women when it comes to fighting fear in the pursuit of justice or activism?
Oh my God. As I said, you have to be so true to yourself. If you feel calling, you have to just go for it and never be in doubt. If you feel that something irritates you, if you feel the power in yourself to stand up to it, just go for it. I was so many times held back by so many fears, and more than fears, advices from mainly actually men. Like, this is not your field. You have to go and do what women's supposed to do. If you feel you want to do that, you have to go for it. You shouldn't be judged or held by any gender stereotypes or any boxing.
Yeah, just push right through.
Yes, if you can do that, go for it.
Yeah, it's great.
We have a question from Mary. Are there professional networks of women supporting women in the workplace?
We're thinking about it. You know, the women supporting philanthropic field is actually a very crowded place. There is more than, as far as I remember, more than 1,500 different organizations that support females and support immigration together with that. So it's very crowded space, but there is not many, actually really few, you can really count them, probably less than 10 organizations that would support females immigrants. That's why I jumped into this space, because one of the principles that we picked up with my husband as a philanthropy is to go to the areas that are undeveloped. There is no need to go somewhere where a lot of people working and quite successful, they're already doing the job, but there is something that nobody want to touch because it's scary, because it's not fancy, because it seems unreachable, undoable. We go there. So that was one of the spaces, one of the blank spots that I found, and I hope I will be really successful there. And yes, with thinking about opportunity creating, supporting network, and how it's going to be. It might be in the partnership with some existing, maybe it's going to be something based on the social network. Maybe it's will be hybrid, when you can kind of connect online and then meet offline. I was also in the very beginning, when I was thinking about First Gen Project Original, I was thinking that they would be so nice. I would like to have something like that, some safe place that you can just come, feel safe, hang out, drink a cup of coffee or tea, and just, you know, for a moment, just forget about all your fears, about all your losses or victories, just some cozy space. And it's still at work, and I think it's still doable, and maybe we'll start from Los Angeles where I'm based, and hopefully the experience will be successful to bring it to other places.
Your commitment to immigrant women is really incredible, Alya. And along those lines, we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Hi, thank you for your work and talking to us. Can you tell us what the conditions are for women journalists, ethnic minorities in the Russian Federation?
You know, this is an interesting question, because unfortunately, I don't think that people really pay attention to even the term, what ethnic minorities are. And this comes from the Soviet heritage, when there were no ethnic minorities. And Russia is a very vast country. People from Siberia or from closer to the China border, they do not look like me at all. We're so very diverse, and the ethnic issue was not even a question during the Soviet time. It wasn't even discussable. We were all even. And mainly because of that, there is still not understanding. Lately, I saw in the media, in the article, that people start raising these questions, because obviously if you're not talking about it, it doesn't mean that problem doesn't exist. Problem does exist. And being an ethnic minority in Russia is not an easy place to be, because the majority of them, you know, they work in the very difficult circumstances, and there are prejudices and stereotypes from the average Russians towards them. So I don't think that's discussed in any ways. But generally, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, being journalist in Russia doesn't mean do you belong to a minority or you do not belong to a minority. Is very difficult, and it's very challenging. And it's very challenging for females. There are some borders and glass ceilings, as we call them. So there is a lot of work to be done.
Another question from Mary. So she says, how does race and ethnicity figure into women's immigration, country of origin?
Well, again, when I started working with the female immigration topic, I, to my surprise, realized that although immigration is a very lonely place. Yes, it's driven by love, by resilience, by your power, by your bravery, but it's a very lonely place because you go from the place where you're supposed to be by nature and go to the absolutely new circumstances. And when you're lonely, you would be naturally reaching out and connect with someone who's in the same situation as you are. But it doesn't work in immigration. Instead of connecting and understand that you belong to the big group of immigrants or global citizens, whoever talk, sometimes people don't like to be called immigrants because it's very politicized, it's negative. They call themselves global citizens. Instead of reaching out and uniting, they reaching out to the group of their origin. So the Chinese people go towards Chinese community, the Russians lean to be next to the Russian community, the people come from different countries, they lean to their communities, which was very surprising to me. And when I started working with immigration topic, I said to myself, why this happening? Why we do not unite? Why don't we take out the stereotypes that we have towards another people, that the same immigrants that we are, and just try to unite, just take this immigration, nation issues away. It does exist within the immigration group, and this is a phenomenon. And I hope by sharing the stories more of females of different origins, I would be able to avoid it and somehow talk, instead of talking about different nations, we would be talking about immigration as the whole united piece, which is, I think, very important.
That's a great point. And here's another question right up your alley. What are the harmful tropes and stereotypes of Russian women or immigrant women that we should look out for and work to erase in entertainment media?
Well, you didn't have to go too far. If you will look at top 10 movies that's even air today, you will see that Russian female either spy or some prostitute or some dangerous female, and something, there is nothing good about it. If you're lucky, maybe you will be somewhere close to space. So the field for Russian female, how female Russian females are portrayed, and actually it's not just about the Russian females, I would say about Slavic females, how negatively they portrayed. Surprisingly for me, all this negativity falls down to the feminine appearance of Slavic and Russian females. And this is one of the interesting things that I researched to myself, because I got so surprised, like why it is, because in my culture, being feminine, being beautiful, take care of yourself, make sure that, you look pleasant, not just to yourself, but to the people around. It's must. There is nothing bad about it. There is nothing behind it. There is no skeletons in your closet. That's just your respect to the people around you. But for whatever reason, this longing Russian females, so Slavic female, to look pleasant, taken and twisted on the way that there is something bad behind it. This is done with the purpose to seduce, to do bad. And again, maybe this is just the heritage of the Cold War, I don't know, but definitely the story about Russian females is very incomplete, and there is more behind it. And that's why I hope that my project with the book depicting Slavic female characters will be eye-opening for some, because this is not just something that I would say or somebody would say. This is century-old wisdoms. I went down to archives. I picked up beautiful stories that were created in 9th and 8th century, and I found the same females that I'm talking about. Beautiful, strong, not losing their power because they're feminine.
Thank you.
Another question from Mary. How involved is Putin in terms of the information that is disseminated? Are journalists feel fearful of the government?
Of course. And I don't know if somebody's following the news from Russia, but if somebody's following, you can almost every day see that one person or another, one mass media or a journalist was pronounced as a foreign agent. And this is something that happened several years ago. There was a law aimed towards independent media mainly, that anyone could be pronounced without trial as foreign agent. And I think the mirrored law exists in the United States here, but at least there is different terms. But in Russia, it's really one-sided and scary. So basically anyone can be named, and there is so many bad circumstances for, doesn't matter if you're a company or a person. So yes, it's not easy to be a journalist in Russia. And I was so happy that it was at least recognized internationally when Dmitry Muratov got a Nobel Peace Prize, because somebody started talking about it. People started asking why this person, why this journalist got a Peace Prize. He got it because his newspaper, which is not paper anymore, it's was forced to go online, is the probably only one newspaper who carries the duty of being investigative sort of journalism. And this is the newspaper that lost many journalists. They were killed by the people who were not happy how their actions or actions their friends or actions their allies were portrayed. I personally, I worked through my career in media that were state-owned, and I also worked on media that were not state-owned, but they owned somebody else. And as I said in the beginning of the conversation, there was always someone to put you on a box. It was just different boxes. One box was made by people who were working for the government, and the other box were from people who were working for the owner of the media. But during my career, I did experience at least one moment when I was a victim of freedom of press, if you can put it like that, when I was a journalist that I reported in news that nobody was there to report. It was the quote of Ministry of Defense, and there is a lot of media wrote about that when that happened, but nobody wrote about me because I worked in the news agency. And when you work in the news agency, you don't have a name, you just work for the agency. And he said something that he shouldn't be saying. His reaction on event, the very terrible bullying in the army that happened in Russian army. And his response was innocent, but it opened up the absolutely horrific wounds and corruption in the Russian army system. And it created, after I released his quote, how he reacted on that, people were going out to rallies around Ministry of Defense carrying this sentence that only I reported. And of course, the people who was working for Ministry of Defense, they immediately called me and they said, you understand that that's going to be your last day to work with us. And I said, why? I was just doing my job. And they said, well, you're not supposed to release it. And so, yes, that was my personal experience. But as I said, I'm not a hero. The heroes who really sacrificed lives. And there were a lot of journalists like that.
Wow. And you felt that personally. I mean, obviously, you felt that threat directly. And so you lost your position over that. That's what I'm hearing,
Yes,
Ellen?
luckily for me, the company I worked for and my boss, of course, she understood what's going on, and she received many calls about firing me, and not just firing me, but also blackmailing me, which means that it would be very difficult for me to find any job that would be comparable with position that I had. And she just said to me, you know what I can do, I can send you abroad. And she sent me abroad to work in Japan, which I actually wanted. So in some ways, I got promotion. But for the people outside, it looks like I was fired. So that was win-win.
Wow. Okay. So you are a true warrior woman. You have faced an awful lot. You've seen a terrorist attack. You have faced the repression of free speech. Just incredible. We will end because we have exhausted our audience questions, but we will end with a question that we always pose here at the Power Hour, which is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about the world in terms of gender justice?
I'm in the middle of reading this incredible book, this Underground Girls of Kabul, and I'm really recommend it, even though it's not an easy read. And there is thousands of stories like this in this book around us. And if I had a chance to make sure that nothing like those stories would ever happen, I would trade my wish for that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Alya. This has been an incredible conversation with an incredible human being who is using all of her power and her resources to fight for a better world for immigrant women. We really appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see everybody next month for the Power Hour. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And thank you again, Alya Michelson, woman of power.
Thank you.